All right, diving right into the deep dive today. And wow, we've got a big one for you all. Should you buy Bitcoin before January 20th, 2025? That's the question we're tackling head on. And you've given us a ton to work with here. Market analysis, political predictions, investment advice, even some, well, let's just say interesting opinions. So buckle up because we're about to break it all down.
This is the question everyone seems to be asking right now. Bitcoin, well, it's always been a bit of a roller coaster, but with the current political climate, things are even more unpredictable. There are a lot of opinions flying around, and separating fact from fiction is, well, it can be tough.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can bring some clarity to the chaos, shall we?
Sounds like a plan. So let's set the stage, shall we? It's January 15th, 2025. Just last month, Bitcoin hit a record-breaking $100,000. I mean, talk about a wild ride. But where are we sitting today?
Well, as of right now, Bitcoin's hanging out around $96,000. It did have a little bit of a dip recently, went below $90,000. Got some people a little bit worried. But it seems to be bouncing back, showing some resilience. Now, analysts are keeping a close eye on this support level, around $91,615. Think of it like a safety net. If Bitcoin drops below that, well, we could see it tumble down to around $74,000. But if it holds steady above that level, well, that could be a sign of even more growth on the horizon.
Okay, support level. Got it. That's a good thing to keep in mind. So there's definitely some risk involved here, but also the potential for things to really take off. One of the sources you sent over, the Motley Fool, they talked about these historical price cycles that Bitcoin has gone through. What's the significance of those cycles in all of this?
Yeah, they bring up a good point. Those cycles, they could be a hint that we'll see more price increases in the future, but they also issued a warning, especially for those thinking short term. Jumping in right now could be, well, a bit risky. Bitcoin's so volatile, timing is everything. But for those with a longer term perspective, well, this could be a really exciting opportunity.
So short-term jitters, long-term potential. I'm starting to see the picture here. Now, there was another article you flagged from Vox, and it brought politics into the mix. It talked about how President Trump's reelection and his policies could have a real impact on Bitcoin. What's the connection there?
Oh, this is where things get really interesting. The article, it raises some concerns about Trump's proposed policies, specifically how they could impact prices, for consumers, particularly in the tech sector. There's talk of some pretty hefty tariffs on imported tech goods. We could see prices jump on everything, laptops, smartphones, even video game consoles, like 26% to 46% price increases. That's a lot.
Hold on, so you're saying that the price of a video game console could impact Bitcoin. How does that even work?
It's all about indirect influence. These tariffs, they hit the tech industry the hardest. But the thing is, the crypto world and the tech world, they're intertwined. Any big shakeup in tech can send ripples through the crypto market. It's all connected.
So let me get this straight. The price of a PlayStation could send Bitcoin on a downward spiral? Who knew?
Well, it's not that straightforward. But the point is, seemingly unrelated things can have a ripple effect. And here's where things get even more complicated. We've got Trump, generally considered pro-crypto, right? He's even proposed a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the country. Sounds good for Bitcoin, right? But then you have these broader economic policies that could, well, throw a wrench in the gears. It's a push and pull, that's for sure.
It's like a roller coaster. Up, down, loop the loops. You never know what's next. And speaking of ups and downs, we can't forget about these wild predictions flying around. Some analysts are saying Bitcoin could hit $400,000 under Trump's crypto-friendly policies. $400,000. Where is that optimism coming from?
Well, some analysts believe that factors like increased adoption, scarcity, and continued innovation in the crypto space, all of that could push the price that high. They see a future where Bitcoin is a major player in the global financial system. But, on the other hand, you've got others predicting that rising bond yields could drag Bitcoin back down to $90,000. Now, you might be wondering, what do bond yields have to do with Bitcoin?
Yeah, honestly, I'm a little lost on that one.
So bond yields, they're basically the potential returns you can get from more traditional investments, like government bonds, things like that.
Yeah.
Generally considered safer, right? If those yields go up, meaning bonds become more attractive, some investors might shift away from riskier assets like Bitcoin, and that could lead to a price drop.
So it's a bit of a seesaw effect. Bond yields up, Bitcoin down, makes you realize how many moving parts there are in this whole Bitcoin equation. Okay, let's bring it back to you, our listener. You're trying to figure out, should I buy Bitcoin before January 20th? Well, one of your sources, Investopedia, had some pretty strong advice on that. What did they have to say?
They were pretty clear, actually. They recommend putting only 1–2% of your portfolio into Bitcoin. And they emphasize that it's because of that volatility we keep talking about. That's a pretty clear warning sign, wouldn't you say?
Definitely sounds like a proceed with caution situation. So let's say someone's ready to, you know, dip their toes into the Bitcoin waters. What are their options? Do they just go online and buy some?
Actually, there are a few different ways to approach it. You could buy Bitcoin directly through an exchange. That gives you total control, but it requires a bit more technical know-how. Or you can invest in a Bitcoin ETF or fund. That can be a bit easier, especially for beginners. There's also the option of buying shares in companies that are related to Bitcoin, like mining companies or blockchain technology firms. Each option has its pros and cons.
So there are ways to test the waters without diving in head first, but no matter what you do, research is key, right? Don't just jump in blindly.
Couldn't agree more. Thorough research is absolutely essential. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, remember, there's no shame in asking for help. A financial advisor can help you figure out your risk tolerance, understand the market, and come up with a plan that works for you.
Solid advice. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground market trends, political ups and downs, even different investment strategies, but we only just scratched the surface here. To really understand Bitcoin, we need to look at the bigger picture, its role in the world of finance. And that's exactly what we'll do next.
It's fascinating to see Bitcoin caught in this tug of war, between traditional finance and the whole crypto world.
Oh, I like that. It's like this battle of the old guard, stocks, bonds, the usual suspects, versus this digital disruptor trying to make its mark.
Yeah, exactly. And that tension, it's playing out everywhere you look. Remember those rising bond yields we were talking about? They're actually a pretty important indicator. They represent the potential returns from those safer, more traditional investments. And if those yields start looking more attractive, well, some investors might start moving away from riskier assets, like Bitcoin.
So it's almost like a balancing act. As bond yields go up, Bitcoin's appeal could go down.
It's definitely a possibility. It all comes down to, investor psychology. Where do they see the best chance for profit?
Mm.
And right now, there's this big debate about whether Bitcoin is a safe haven asset, like gold, or if it's just, well, a purely speculative game.
One thing that always strikes me about Bitcoin is how much it relies on, well, belief. It's not backed by a government or anything physical like gold. Its value comes from what people believe it's worth.
That's a really important point. Bitcoin's value. It's driven by this mix of factors. You've got supply and demand, media hype, technological advancements, even social trends. It's a fascinating example of how, well, perception can actually shape reality in the financial world.
It's almost like this massive social experiment,
Yeah.
happening in real time. But we can't forget about the practical side of things. People are buying and selling Bitcoin, making transactions, even investing their life savings. This isn't just some abstract concept anymore.
You're absolutely right. And that's why understanding the risks and the potential rewards is so crucial. We've talked about the volatility, the political influences, but there's more to consider. Regulation, for instance, that's a big one. Governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to regulate cryptocurrencies. Any new laws or restrictions could have a huge impact on the market.
Yeah, it seems like every other day there's a new headline about some country cracking down on Bitcoin. It's like the Wild West out there.
It really is. And you've got security concerns, the potential for scams, the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining. It's a lot to navigate.
So for someone who's maybe a bit intimidated by all of this, but still curious about Bitcoin, what would you tell them?
Start small. That's my advice. Don't invest more than you can afford to lose. Take your time, educate yourself. There are so many resources out there. And remember, this is a long game. Bitcoin and the whole crypto space, they're still relatively young. There are going to be ups and downs, twists and turns along the way. Don't get caught up in the hype and don't panic sell if things get a little bumpy.
That's great advice. Knowledge is power, right? The more you understand, the better decisions you can make.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Talk to people who know about crypto. Maybe consult a financial advisor if you need to. Stay curious. This is a fascinating space that's constantly evolving.
The big question on my mind is, what does the future hold for Bitcoin? Is it just a fad, or is this really the future of finance? I know we can't predict the future, but what are some of the trends you're seeing that might give us a clue?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And while I don't have a crystal ball, there are some developments I find really intriguing. One is the growing institutional adoption of Bitcoin. We're seeing major companies, even some governments, starting to embrace crypto. It's a huge change from just a few years ago when it was seen as this fringe thing.
Yeah, I remember reading about El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. That was a big moment.
It definitely was. It sent shockwaves through the whole financial system. Who knows if other countries will follow suit, but it shows that Bitcoin is not being ignored by the mainstream anymore.
So more legitimacy, more acceptance. It seems like Bitcoin might be here to stay. What else is on your radar?
Well, another trend worth watching is the development of decentralized finance, or DeFi. It's this whole ecosystem of financial applications built on blockchain technology. And it could really disrupt traditional financial systems in a big way.
DeFi, huh? It sounds interesting, but also a bit intimidating. Can you break that down for us a little? What could it mean for, everyday people?
Think of it this way. DeFi is about creating a more open, transparent, and accessible financial system. Imagine being able to borrow and lend money, trade assets, even earn interest without needing a bank. That's the potential of DeFi, and starting to gain some real traction.
Wow, that sounds almost utopian, but I'm guessing there are challenges and risks with DeFi as well, right?
Of course, it's still very new and experimental. There are definitely concerns about security, regulation, and the potential for scams, but the innovation happening in DeFi is incredible, and it's something to keep an eye on.
Okay, so we've got increasing institutional adoption, the rise of DeFi, and of course that volatility that never seems to go away. It sounds like Bitcoin's future is far from certain.
That's what makes it so exciting. It's dynamic, it's constantly changing, which makes it both challenging and full of potential. And that brings us to the big question. What are the long-term implications of these trends? And what do they mean for you, the listener?
Let's dive into that. All right, so we've talked about market trends, we've explored the political landscape, we've even dipped our toes into the world of DeFi, and we've touched on, some of the bigger philosophical questions around Bitcoin. But now let's bring it back to you, the listener. What does all of this mean for you? You're the one trying to decide, should I buy Bitcoin before January 20th?
Yeah, if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, I think the key takeaway here is that Bitcoin, and really the whole crypto space, it represents a fundamental shift. A shift in how we think about money, about finance. It's a challenge to the way things have always been done, a push towards democratizing financial systems. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, well, that's still up for debate. But one thing's for sure, it's a force to be reckoned with.
It's not just about, what's the price of Bitcoin going to do today or tomorrow? It's about the potential for a whole new financial system. And well, it's exciting, but it's also a little bit scary, right?
Exactly. We're in uncharted territory here. And that always comes with risks, but it also opens up incredible opportunities. For those who are willing to learn, to adapt, to embrace the uncertainty, the potential rewards could be huge.
So back to our original question, should you buy Bitcoin before January 20th? I know we haven't given a straight answer, but what's your gut feeling?
Honestly, I can't tell you what to do. It's a personal decision. It depends on your own situation, your risk tolerance, your financial goals. But here's what I will say. Don't let fear control your decisions. And don't let that fear of missing out, that FOMO, drive you either. Do your research, think critically, and be prepared for a wild ride. We're just at the beginning of the Bitcoin story, and who knows what's going to happen next.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. We've given you a lot to consider today, but ultimately the decision is yours. What do you think is the most important factor to consider right now? Is it those market trends, the political landscape, the rise of DeFi, or maybe something else entirely? We want to hear from you.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's always more to learn. The world of crypto is constantly evolving, so stay curious, stay informed.
And who knows, maybe by the time we do our next deep dive, Bitcoin will have hit that $400,000 mark, or maybe it'll have gone in a totally different direction. That's the fun of it all, isn't it? Until next time, happy investing.